You ready?
Yes! Thank you, cousin, making me this bird table.
This week is all about how I built a giant bird table for my cousin's communal garden, and he shares it with other lads who have disabilities. Hopefully it'll give them much enjoyment of bird watching and a routine of feeding them every morning. Let me show you how I made it. So we'll start with an offcut of birch plywood, which will be the table's main platform. And I'm marking the longest length of it on a ripped down Renegade strip of skirting board that I found. As usual, I'll leave a free set of plans and links to things I'm using below. And I cut 2 of those lengths on the crosscut saw, but hand saws, if more accessible, are absolutely fine. Then place them behind the platform piece, pushed all 3 against a flat edge, then I can work out the length of my next 2 side pieces. And now it's a matter of gluing and nailing or pre-drilling and screwing the sides on. Then, with the old skirting board being ripped in a position where I left a beveled edge, I belt sanded the corners to match it. Next, I'd cut 4 studs for the corners. These were originally ripped CLS, which will hold the roof later, and they had some sharp edges which I rounded off with sandpaper. While I was there, I sanded off the table's edges as well. Before I fixed those corner posts in place, I held 1 in each corner to pre-drill holes from either side. And 1 from underneath before gluing and screwing them on. Now I've got what looks like a small coffee table. So let's give it a pitched roof. With another offcut that was at least twice the length of the longest edge, I marked and cut to the same width as the base. I marked a lower piece on either side. Then a centre point, and using a straight edge, I could then draw my apex shape before taking it to the bandsaw to cut. If you don't own one of these, because I don't at home, some clamps and a jigsaw or handsaw will work too. Pretty sweet. Now to cut another 2 sides, I held another offcut along the 2 corner posts on the shortest side to match the width from the bottom, but don't take the measurements from towards the top as it's less likely to be correct. By the way, this offcut is also the same one that I used to mark the shortest height, so I knew it would match, and glued and screwed it together. After slotting it on top of the corner posts, I'd cut and clamped 4 pieces of wood to the post itself, which would prop it up while I pre-drilled and screwed the top on. To make it more rigid, I also nailed another structural piece in the centre at the top. This would also give me somewhere to nail the roof on and some trim. However, while placing some lap panel offcuts on top for a visual, this is where the roof started to look a little bit too flat. So I grabbed the offcuts I'd created from cutting the pitched roof and nailed and screwed those back on top. And then another structural piece in the middle to reinforce it, and screwed from underneath. For the roof, back to those offcut lap panels. These are pressure treated, and overall, as you've probably noticed, this project is great for using offcuts. And I overlapped them by about 1 inch, with the thickest edge facing down towards the slope. Although I had to take my time while lining up and nailing because the top's apex frame was quite thin. But before I added some scrolly trim, I cut more studs with a mitre to meet in the centre and clamped it to the lap panels so I could nail from above. It's not vital that these mitres are perfect, as we'll be adding another detail piece later, but before I handsawed the protruding lengths, I also found some quadrant beading which I nailed top centre, leaving some overhang so I could cut down to match the roof. to the scrolly trim that I was talking about. I used more lap panel offcuts. And here's my dad encouraging me to freestyle a pattern which initially felt really wrong, but actually my wavy design worked out really cool, so feel free to get creative or just leave it as it is. But once I'd cut one with a bandsaw, I then took it to the rest of the pieces, drew around it and repeated cutting. Then nailed them on the front and covered the miter join with another offcut bandsaw shape. Now you don't have to, but this time I used tongue and groove offcuts to draw some curved corner gussets and attach them to the posts. I initially just made 4 to nail on, but ended up loving the detail so much that I made some more and added to the other sides. And drilled a few drainage holes along the sides for water to run off. For anyone wondering though, this is exterior plywood. Then to stain and treat it all, which I often tend to forget to share what I'm using. So this time I got it on camera and it's called Aquashield in brown, which is environmentally friendly. For the bird table stand, something that I've always wanted to do, and that is to create a half lap join. So I'm taking some lessons from my dad on the best way to measure it. I've got 2 pieces here, which will be the upper part of the stand. And I need to cut a notch in the centre of both. Place one on the end and mark it, then measured the remaining distance and found the centre point of that. Now hold the timber against the mark and recheck the distance from the other end to see if it matches. If it is, mark on the other side of it and remove to draw a line with a speed square. Then repeat with the other piece, which will eventually make a cross. For the notch, that needs to be exactly halfway down, and after measuring and marking it, my dad's setting up the crosscut saw for me so I could make a series of notches. Again, if you don't have this, I'd just use a circular saw set to the right depth. And glued and screwed it together. I was going to use a 3-inch wide post for the leg, but my dad found this fancy newel post for some more extravagance. Then glued and nailed some mitered supports before moving on to drilling and screwing to fasten it properly. But just a reminder though, I'm still working on the post while it's upside down. The feet need to be a lot bigger than this due to the size of it. But it was way too high, so I clamped and handsawed it down to 1.2 metres. For the large base though, I found much bigger pieces. And instead of the half lap join this time, I glued and stacked them on top of each other to screw an easy cross. Then added feet as blocks to make up the difference before screwing it to the post itself. But this time I screwed on bigger supports and more screws throughout to make sure I didn't miss any and make sure it was robust. Now the base gets treated so I could leave it to dry before taking it to its new home. Although I had a camera fail here because my tripod sloped down while I got help to put the table on top. And after making it level, I asked my cousin if he'd like to pop in the final 4 screws, which I'd already pre-drilled holes for him.
Yep.
Keep going. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Bit more. That's it. That's it. Perfect.
Done.
Push it down more. Yep. Done. Right. Let's make an offer the birds can't refuse. Fat balls, peanuts, and seeds. And I think they're going to enjoy topping the table up every morning as part of their routine. They've also promised to send me some pictures of customers. This is how I do it, and I'm really putting myself...
Nathan, you want to do it.
You have to be quiet though.
Nathan, help me.
What about this? Hi everyone, this week I'm going to show you how to make a giant bird table for my cousin Joel. And that were embarrassing, that end. I'll do it. I'll try it one more time because the ending were a bit like...
I've got it now.
This week I'm going to show you how to make a very large... See, I've just messed up. This This week I'm going to show you how to make a very large bird table for your garden. So keep on watching.
Well done.
I just keep it short and sweet because I know that I'm going to mess up. And if I have too much to say, I'll be here all day.
Okay.